All right, we are live on UNLV Biomechanics Facebook page, and we are recording. I'm John Mercer, professor at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas in the Department of Kinesiology and Nutrition Sciences. Also president of the Las Vegas Triathlon Club. And this video is in large part for UNLV and our students, but also crosses over very nicely with our endurance community. I think both audiences will enjoy hearing this talk. And we've got a fun guest today, someone I've known for quite some time, James Johnston. Hey, James, how's it going?
Great. How about you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here.
I know you're in Arizona now, but we crossed paths many years ago here in Las Vegas, and there's several ways that we connected. One, I don't know if you remember, but there was the Las Vegas Marathon, and I was biking, and I was basically following my wife and another friend, and I'm biking along, and somehow either her name came up or my name came up, and I'm on my bike, and you turned around and said, "John Mercer?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Hey, it's James." I said, "Oh, how cool." So we ran into each other during the marathon course, which was pretty cool. But we've crossed paths a lot because you are general manager of a shoe store, and you do a lot with the running community. And we talked early on about, I think one of our first conversations was about rocker bottom shoes. I don't know if you remember those. That was the first wave of rocker bottom shoes came out. Actually, probably before that conversation, we may have been talking about the barefoot running, and that led to the discussion on the rocker bottom.
It was.
So going from one end of the spectrum to the other. And we got talking about it so much that I ended up doing a research project and publishing a paper on the work of rocker bottom. And we were one of the first groups to do some of the research on rocker bottom. So that was really, a big thanks to you for pointing me in that direction.
That was so. I'm going to add to the story a little bit. I remember your first intrigue at what we did is when you came in and noticed we did a pressure plate instead of doing a typical traditional gait analysis. And you at that time had said, the only place I've ever seen this was in labs. I didn't know this was available in stores. And at that time I had the Athlete's Foot franchise, which had a proprietary machine just made for them. I think they had a 3-year moratorium where no one else could make this machine. And you looked at this and said, "This is exactly what I'm talking about." He says, "Can I just sit here and watch?" Yeah. And you sat there and watched a few foot strikes come across, and then you even sent some of your students down. I think you even sent some for job applications as well.
Yeah.
Because you were so intrigued by what this data was I was getting. And this is just in a shoe store, and the conversations that we used to get because of this, where so many people were not necessarily an overpronator who you think would be an overpronator. Not everybody had the same gait that was assumed to be for their foot type. Mm-hmm. And so it was very intriguing. And then, so that was the first time I think I got your attention.
Yeah. No, that's right. Yeah. So you were into the science well before. So that's awesome.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And then when we started the Rock and Runners Marathon Training Program, you had come down and spoken to the group a few times. And after they left for the run, you and I would chit chat a few. And I remember one of the conversations we had was about the Born to Run book. Mm-hmm. And we were discussing the importance of, or I'd asked you, I said, "I read this stat in here. Does this seem right to you?" It says 5,000 pounds per square, it says you strike the ground with up to 5,000 pounds worth of force. And I had said to you, I said, "To the best of my knowledge, we strike the ground with up to 2.5 times our body weight. At most, that's like in basketball when you're bringing down a rebound." Mm-hmm. And you said, "Well, it seems wrong, but I think I've seen something like this before." And you got back to me that night in an email saying, "I looked it up, I found it out. It's 5,000 pounds of force per square inch." Yeah. And so I'm like, all right, that at least answers it. But it shows you, what it showed us at that time was it showed you the reason why that book was written was for effect. Yeah. It kind of demonstrated that book was a bit of an exaggeration because the guy was I would say he was a starving author at that point. Mm-hmm. And so that was another fun conversation. But then the third conversation was I had a study in hand from Skechers. And in that study, it showed it showed that women lost weight, they got stronger and healthier, something like that. I forgot what the third one was. And that's what they used in their advertising. And so at that time, there was no studies to counter it. Everything was pro. But that one study that I showed you, you looked at and you said, there's no, there's only 5 women, Redondo Beach, March, and you noticed that there was no control. You're like, how in the world? You recognize the guy who did the study, and you saw his name. You're like, oh, he's a big name. He knows what he's doing. He says, he's sold out. And you said, there's no way that this is correct. This isn't right. And so, these women, it was all table tests. All the tests were all table for strengthening. Yep. So, if you do them twice, you get stronger just by the simple fact that you did it twice. So you were keen to the context of this report that you saw. And so about a week or two later, you reached out to me. You said, hey, do you have a pretty good selection of those shoes in your shop? I think I might be interested in picking some up. I think we got a study we're going to do.
Yeah.
And that was a lot of fun.
No, I love that. Yeah, that's a nice lead-in story. And, I think that raises a good point that we always need to be skeptical of any research that comes out. And you often do need to look at, any biases a researcher may have. And it's funny, actually, I had gone on since then. I actually had a talk with the FDA about some of the advertisements that were going out by Skechers. So, and then subsequently there were a few lawsuit problems that were happening off of that. So,
yeah.
But that was neat to get in on the research, and I really got in because of you. And I think that's what's neat talking with you now is you're in the industry world, I'm in the academic world, but these two worlds need to coexist. And it's not always easy, but the conversations that we've had can be really rich and sort of fun. So let's take a step back though. I want to know how you got into the shoe industry and into performance footwear.
Reluctantly. So back in New York, we're born and raised, 24 years old, went to St. John's University, 5 years college, no degree, actually associate's degree. Couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. So my parents sold their clothing store that they had, or lost their lease on their clothing store that they had out there for decades, and decided they were going to travel. So they got to Vegas, fell in love with Vegas. And my dad always he always used to complain that he never understood enough about business to run a business properly. He says he never took any classes, he was kind of thrust into retail and never knew how to buy correctly, budget, allocate funds. He just didn't understand. And so he always wanted a franchise. He says, at least in a franchise, they tell you how to run a business. And so he was willing to pay the royalty fees for that. And so he bought into the Athlete's Foot franchise. Mm-hmm. He went to a convention and they sold him. They told him that how great they were. And he bought into the business. And, customer service is a big part of what they did. And that's a big part of what we did in New York as well. So they came out here, they opened the business up. Or before they opened the business up, my parents made me an offer I couldn't refuse. They said, well, if you want to stay here in New York, you're going to have to do it on your own because we're selling our house. And you're going to have to figure out how you're going to do that. Don't know how you're going to do it. It's not cheap to live in New York. And so they said, either you're going to figure it out here or you're going to come with us and help us run the business. And you'll live rent free for the first 6 months. And we'll take care of you. I'm like, hey, it sounds like a good deal. I don't have to shovel snow anymore. I don't have to, deal with the craziness of New York.
Traffic's a little better out this way too. So
absolutely. So I loved it. As a 24-year-old in Las Vegas, it was prime time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So fell in love with Vegas. So anyway, parents wrote me in. I'm thinking of this as a clerk kind of position. I'm like, someone comes in, says, I'm going to get a shoe and bring you a shoe. While I was out there, I was even looking for other jobs for my first 6 months. And during that time period, the Athlete's Foot provided certain trainings that were incredible. The guy who used to write for Runner's World, his name was Tom Brunick. He used to do footwear reviews and for Walking Magazine, Fitness Magazine. He used to do all these reviews, and then he was hired on by the Athlete's Foot to do their training. He used to do reviews for the Athlete's Foot on all the shoes that were coming out as well. So we had a backroom set of reviews to look at. And he used to come into the shops and spend a day with you to teach you and your staff. And that was where I started realizing, there's a little bit more to this world, you know. About a year later, he started a program that was called a Master Fit Training. And this Master Fit Training was supposed to connect us with the podiatry and medical world. But what it really did is it taught us the bones, the muscles, the ligaments. It taught us the common injuries and treatments of. So it gave a whole medical context to what we were doing. And so I went from enjoying the clerk side of it, where it was easy, to the other side of it, where it was more complex. It was where I had a chance to kind of troubleshoot and help people figure out what problems they were going through and how to address those problems. To me, that was fun. I'm like, I get to help people without a medical degree and feel as fulfilled as a doctor would feel. You know, that feeling is outstanding. It's to have someone come back and said, my problem is gone, and say my problem is gone, or you know, that problem I used to have all the time, you helped me work through it. And just those troubleshooting tips that you get to help people with. And that was a turning point for me. At that point, I went from liking what I did to loving what I did. And now this is a career for me. This wasn't a job. It wasn't, I'm helping my parents out. This was, I love what I'm doing. This is hobby. This is fun. And I look forward to coming to work every day.
Well, and I'll tell you that you quickly gained a reputation of someone who would look at someone's gait and then try to help find the right shoe for them, as opposed to putting the shoe in front of them and then you know, selling the shoe. And so you quickly hit the town and became known for that gait analysis, you know, really from, you know, your expertise was just watching someone walk or run.
The repetition of it definitely helped. The frequency of it, every day having someone take a jog outside, watching them run. So let's see how this works, how that works. A lot of troubleshooting on my part too. So I will say that I didn't stop there. I research stuff sometimes. Someone will come in. I used to have a woman, her name's Kelly Archuleta. Do you remember her?
No.
She was a 9-time Olympic qualifier.
Okay.
This phenomenal athlete, right? She comes in, she lived in the neighborhood. She used to come in all the time, talk to other athletes, and her little neighborhood shop, you know, and she would come in, talk to us. She had a very pronounced Q angle. I'm assuming most of your ex-students should be familiar with Q angle, but it relates to the femur coming in, and women more so than on guys, the average of 18 degrees versus I think an average of 12 for a guy, somewhere around there. And so this angle creates a connection at the knee, and the feet will often look like this. And if you ever watch Friends, they used to call it the Phoebe run. Phoebe would run with a wide range of movement. And so if you ever hear someone say you run like a girl and you're a girl, you should say, yes, I do, and thank you. Your body is your body, and that's the way your body works. But the Q angle created something different from my eyes than what I was used to seeing, this very wide rotation of movement. And so she was troubleshooting a problem. And at that time, I was like, I don't know what to do with your feet. Do I put you in a very strong shoe that limits your range of motion? How do I stop what I see here? And so I tried putting her in a motion control shoe, and she put that shoe on and said, that's horrible. I'll never wear that shoe. And so I realized it's not for everybody, and this is not really her fix. So I took the consult of one of my clients who was a physical therapist to ask them, what do you do about this movement that I'm seeing? And they turned to me and said, nothing. You let it be. And he says, your body is an amazing piece of machinery, and the body will adapt and do what the body does. And so I took that advice and I passed it along to her. But those are the types of things that I took a lot of pride in. I took pride in not pretending to know an answer that I didn't have. You know, I'd research it and figure it out, and then say, this is what I learned, and this is, you know, it's not going to be black and white. It's not for everybody, but this is what you should try. Here's some troubleshooting. And let's look at steps to troubleshoot.
No, I love that because not everyone can look like Eliud Kipchoge or Ryan Hall when running, nor should they. And I love that, idea that you need to find that running style that is yours because it's that way, partly because of the way you're built.
Absolutely.
I mean,
And
that's
that,
awesome.
and that's something that I speak of frequently. You know, people are coming in all the time reading something online about barefoot running or minimalist running or midfoot running or heel strike or one thing or the forefoot running. And I tell people all the time, it's not a blanket statement for anybody.
Mhm.
It's what works right for you,
Mhm.
and sometimes you got to experiment a little bit. You got to figure out what you are.
Mhm.
And that's, it's not black and white. And it drives me nuts when I get a book or a magazine article or a web page that really preaches something that way. It's like, no, that's not the way this world works.
Yep. No, for sure. I mean, even foot strike patterns and what have you. But I love what you said is that you do need to try different ways to run. I mean, that's what running drills end up being is just, introduce your brain to some alternative styles and then see what the brain says. Okay, this is going to work. This doesn't work. So
Exactly.
that's
Exactly.
awesome. Now, let me go back to the shoe store, and you've got these people coming in, and you're looking at their gait and recommending shoes. What's a typical number of models or brands of shoes that you end up carrying?
I'd say, well, a good analogy or a good way to visualize it, there's about 6 top brands. And of the 6 top brands, you average about 5 models per brand, men's and women's.
Hmm.
So figure 30.
Yeah.
It's a good solid number. And that gives you tools for the black and white world.
Yeah.
Now you got to bring in some of those fringe shoes to go with some of those fringe forms of running, and
Hmm.
so it does add your expense, your setup to somewhere in the ballpark of 40 to 50 because of the
Hmm.
fringe, and that's where you tend to have some fun as a
Hmm.
in that where, hey, here's a person who runs forefoot. Most shoes are never made for someone who runs
Yeah.
forefoot.
Yeah.
I got to have a shoe made for that person,
Hmm.
that works for that. So um, yeah, you got to have the tools. You got to have the tools. You have to have the ability to analyze. You have to have the ability. So I talk about the rule of the 5 Fs. You have to fit, function, feel right. Fashion and finance play a role, but the first 3 have to be there in the first place. So we have to fit you up right. We got to measure you. We got to do all those processes there, but it has to function right. It has to work to match your set of criteria. And that's where you really have to have the tools. The feel, that's your perceptions. That's your tastes, Um, the colors, I always tell people the colors, that's something that once you meet the first 3 criteria, we'll find you a color. We'll order you up something if it doesn't work. There's always another color out there.
Oh, I love it. Okay, so wait a second. I got fit, function, feel, finance, and what was the last one?
Fit, function, feel, fashion, and finance.
Fashion. That's awesome. I love it. Yeah, no, the fashion matters. I mean, my shoes have to match my race kit.
But if the other 3 don't work, then don't bother.
That's right. Well, and see, and this is what's so cool about what you've offered at Performance Footwear is that you walk in as a runner and it's overwhelming. How do you pick the right shoe? And you end up just in your mind going to whatever marketing, has worked. And you said, well, I need to try brand X because that's what I hear is a good shoe. But yet, and I know you're an advocate. It's like, find the shoe that works, not the brand that works. And it may be a
Exactly.
brand, but you still got to
Well,
figure out what
it's
works.
it's the model. It's individual model. So when someone says I wear Brooks, I'm like, that doesn't matter to me. What Brooks did you
Yeah.
wear?
Yeah.
Which Asics did you wear? That's more important. At the end of the day, the main brands do the research and development.
Mhm.
They're not your marketing companies. And from your background, from what I remember, you actually had some testing that you used to do for Adidas back in the day, and
Yeah.
I don't know if you still do that. Um,
Not just for Adidas, but yeah, other shoe companies too. Yeah.
yeah. So I remember you used to do some, and that's so crucial when a company is paying somebody to test a product. Is it doing the job we wanted our designer to produce out of this?
Hmm.
And so, to me, that says a ton. Because if you look at the average Nike, Adidas, Reebok, Skechers, Under Armour, most of those marketing brands, they're more about telling you they do the job than doing the job that they're telling you. And so you have to be so careful of those brands and knowing that what their intentions are. So your function brands, make very few fashion models. Your fashion brands make very few function models. So if you stick with the function brands, your averages are higher that you get a good pair of shoes that do a better job. So usually stick with the with where the homework is applied.
That's
So
great.
that's on our side, on the retail side, I follow designers. So since this is actually the career mode component of one of the things is there's about almost 20 biomechanical engineers who produce the majority of these running shoes. So if you figure there's 20 guys making most of the good shoes out there, who's making the other stuff? They're painters. That's all they are. They're designers. But these biomechanical engineers are far and few between. Most of them were trained by Nike in the 80s when Nike was a running brand. And so they've kind of splintered off, and now they're contractors going from brand to brand, whoever's paying at the moment. And so there's room, in my opinion, in the industry for biomechanical engineers on the footwear development side of things. Most of the times when I see a new brand coming around, it's more like trial and error and not necessarily coming at it from a point of knowledge, but they had a good idea, they ran with it, but they didn't come at it with a good biomechanical background.
Right.
So,
well, you're right, because we've seen new types of footwear enter the industry, and it all seems like, catching a wave. But then you watch the injury stats, and all of a sudden, 2 or 3 years into it, it's like, no, this isn't helping. In fact, it may be making things worse. And so then those go away. So you need that sustainable, innovative idea for shoes. But it is, the innovation in the shoe industry, there's little tweaks here and there, but I think you're right. There's room for innovating, but with sound ideas.
Absolutely. That's where I think there's a new revolution that could happen if someone comes in with real knowledge and they come in with the tools to create the right product.
So there's so many things happening in the shoe industry, even though there's general statements you can make. Your shoe has midsole, upper, things like that. But how do you stay current with the shoe industry? The latest is to put carbon fiber in the midsoles and meta rockers and obviously we've seen the pendulum swing from minimalist shoe cushioning to extreme cushioning shoes.
Maximalist.
So, maximalist. So how do you, as a general manager, shoe industry person, how do you stay current?
Well, so a lot of times the training is continual through our vendors themselves. They have tech reps that come out and they're schooled in their technologies and their latest and their greatest, and they'll teach us. And then if I ask the right questions, I can really dig into their geek side and get them to speak in my language rather than speak in the everyday Joe language.
Yep.
And I get also there are designers who enjoy coming out and picking my brains, which is great. I love to get the designer, because then now we're speaking languages of equaling sales as well. Not just making something that works right. So it's got to work for both ends, where they make money at doing what they're doing, so they continue to make that product. But from a product knowledge standpoint, a lot of things like you said about the carbon fiber addition, that is, it's not necessarily new. In other words, it's just new that you've heard about it. These are things that have been around for a while. A lot of things that are changes that are going on are things that someone else has done and that someone has made it better. I'm going to use an example of current events on Brooks. Brooks changed their shoes in some key models, the Brooks Beast and Ariel and the Adrenalines. Those shoes used to have a medial post that kept the foot from overpronating by keeping it firm on the inside. Rather than have a medial post now, they nest the foot and they keep it so that it is controlled in its dynamic from go. So you strike the ground and the foot is nested now within some sidewalls that didn't used to exist ever on a running shoe that guide the foot through the gait process. Now, many years ago, a company had tried this. It was Pro Lazumi. And Pro Izumi in its heyday, in its early years, they built what they called a synchro frame around the outside. It was plastic and it went around the whole outside of the shoe. They actually created a curve-lasted motion control shoe by doing this, which is abnormal in our industry. But it worked great for someone who needed that level of support but didn't want the clunkiness of a traditional motion control shoe. The downside of that nesting that they did was that it was plastic, and plastic equals heavy. And so Brooks is now doing that with midsole materials. So foam and EVA is essentially the rail. They call it a guide rail, but your foot is kind of in this rail system and controlled. And to me, that is a much more subtle way of going about the job without your feet and body recognizing the jarring of being shifted and maneuvered and changed. So you go through the gait cycle and it's jarred over to a different direction. Huge innovation in my opinion, but understated. Most people don't speak of it because it's a confusing topic. It's not fun to talk about, but it is in my opinion, it's allowing shoes to get a ton lighter, and they're going to be better. It's interesting though, is that I have people now returning some of these shoes saying they don't have enough support. Well, why is there not enough support? It's doing the same job. The only difference is they don't feel like it's doing the same job. I'm like, it's only the people who've had the shoe before who are complaining. Someone who's new to it doesn't have a point of reference. But it's a huge innovation, and it's evolving technologies, and the education side of that is very hard to give to the consumer. So really, the companies rely on us as a first line of education to the consumer. So essentially, the student becomes the teacher. And that's actually what I think a lot of people in your field would enjoy about and actually I know of other running shoe shops that they have business partners who are either physical therapists or kinesiology degrees that they get to use day in and day out because it's fun. It's a fun topic. It matches in the triathlon world. It matches in with the cycling. It matches in with the running. It matches, and it's a hobby for them. Yep. And it's if you love the science of it, you get to apply the science on a day in and day out aspect. And to own these kinds of businesses, it allows you to become the teacher.
Well, I love it. First, I got to say I'm intrigued by the shoes. I need to go try them, so I'll certainly do that. But I love what you're talking about now, that these are job opportunities for students. You can go to shoe manufacturers and look for, they all call it something different, anywhere from foot designer or footwear designer to regional rep to sales rep, whatever it is. But then the student or that job, they're going out to the field, to shoe stores, and working with the owners, operators, managers in terms of delivering, what the knowledge they have about a particular shoe. And that's a great entry-level job. In fact, I've actually had graduate students come and work with me after working that type of job before, because it was just such a neat area for them, and they just wanted to explore the area in a deeper way.
That's it's a way to add some fun into what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's apply the knowledge you got.
And do a little bit of travel there too, because when races start again, I mean, they send these reps to any races that have expos. Yep. And now they're educating the consumer as well. And so it's a neat way to apply your kinesiology, your biomechanics, ex-phys expertise over to shoe. All right, now let's switch gears, because I know you're a big believer in building community. Yes. And you use your store as sort of a focal point for building community. And like you said in the beginning when we talked, we really sort of met and formed a relationship over the Rockin' Runners, which is a great program to introduce people to running, anywhere from a 5K to a marathon. Right. And you're still doing that. You're doing a different form of it, but you're still building community. Can you talk about the importance of and the enjoyment of working with the community?
Oh, absolutely. So years ago, there was a book that was out. Jeff Slutsky is the author, and it was called Crossing the Lease Line. And it was called Crossing the Lease Line. I remember his name. And it taught you how to cross the lease line. What it did is it encouraged you to not throw your money away on TV commercials and newspapers and billboards, which would be how most of us visualize marketing to be. When you're a local shop, when you're a local business, you have to think local. And that means going and networking. It's getting to know the right people, but to get them to believe in you, to get them to understand what you do. So I would go down to the local high schools and speak to their students. So I'd ask the track coach, can I get in front of your kids for 15 minutes? You know, and public speaking was a challenge in the beginning, but I got better at it the more I did it. You know, it just comes down to practice. And over time, that evolved from speaking to kids to speaking to the Air Force Base, doing commander's calls, 600 people at a time, to now going out and doing presentations for marathon training groups. And so over time, I was dealing with all these groups, and they were getting further and further away from town. So not necessarily my community anymore. Well, they were my community, but they were getting further away from my stores. So I wanted to kind of rein it in a little bit more. So in order to do that, instead of sending everyone to go train with one of those training programs, I created my own, the Rock and Runners. And what was different about our program is we were considered an education program. So we taught from scratch, from zero, how to do a half marathon. And it's not everyone's bag. A lot of people, they struggle mentally and physically on how to do these things. And so the Las Vegas Marathon at that time was getting bigger. It was getting a lot of promotions. It was just bought out by the Rock and Roll Marathon, which put a lot of money on that. And it was growing and seemingly more fun. You had a band on every corner. You had, so it was going to be a blast. So I had people who wanted to do this. I watched people come in consistently who are injured from not training correctly. It's normal. As people think that they've got this, and they don't. They're active, they're physical, they do sports, but a marathon or a half marathon is a different world. It's now, endurance is not the same as strength. And so people confuse it frequently. A lot of personal trainers, for example, are strong people, but they don't always get what the endurance world is. And they would be the ones who were gung-ho, and they were the hurt runner. My job was to take in all types, beginners and experienced, but teach them how to do this the right way. And so before we did our runs every week, we had a guest speaker who would come down and speak on their specialty. John, you were there a few times. And we'd have podiatrists, we've had physical therapists, trainers, dietitians, and it was enlightening for me because I'm learning more too, but also the aha moments. You see the light bulbs go on over. So it's like, oh, that's what it's about, is when you can really see someone change because of their knowledge, the fact that they learn more, and so that was so fulfilling. So after, we trained almost 300 people a year for the Las Vegas Marathon. It was a good amount of people. And the hugs and the kisses and the embraces, you see people crying when they're done with the marathon. They just accomplished something they didn't think was ever possible in their life. People who lost weight, people who, really it's not the reason you do these programs is to lose weight, but people who lost weight, they changed their mindset. And I still follow so many of these people on Facebook, and I see how many people are still continuing to do events and races, and the smiles on their faces. And I'm like, it feels so good to know that I kind of gave them that kick in the pants to get going, and they gave them the tools to get there. It feels really good that they are now the teachers. They're teaching other people how to get there. So really great experience doing that program. Actually, Rock and Runners is still alive in Las Vegas. And so I kept one of the coaches that we had, Nancy Dickinson, huge triathlete.
Nancy Jones now. Yeah.
Nancy Jones, Dickinson Jones. That's right, Nancy Jones. And so she took over the program. Once I left, I said, there's no way I can give it the attention it needs. And Nancy happily embraced it. She embodies what Rockin' Runners really is. She is so passionate about it.
And we did a Las Vegas Tri Club coach spotlight with her, and she talked about the Rockin' Runners as well. So it's great. It's a great program, and you handed that off into good hands. So
absolutely.
All right. So now I want to switch gears a little bit to what you're getting into, because the Rockin' Runners was really, catered to introducing athletes to running and distance, even though you also had some pretty high level runners in that group. I want you to maybe give some advice for the new runner or new triathlete in terms of shoes. What's the biggest mistake that they make, or what should be the mistake that they should be avoiding when they go to a shoe store?
So your expectations of a shoe store should be high. Visualize us as your pit crew, right? You couldn't possibly run a race. Let's use a car, right? You couldn't run a race without a pit crew. It's not feasible, right? So essentially, we are your troubleshooters. We are there to help guide you along this path. Part of it's coaching, it's the other part of it is in the conversations, but we're learning you. So at a good specialty running shop, if they don't ask you at least 5 questions, they are not quantified. They don't have no ability to quantify you. They have no ability to give you advice properly without enough data. You have to have data. So if you walk into a shop and within the first paragraph, they say, "Oh, you need a Hoka." Mm-hmm. And it's like, no, that's the wrong shop, because that's not how it works. It is about troubleshooting, about learning. I should ask you 5 questions. I should be gathering data right along the way. I'm doing the foot strike analysis. We still do the pressure pad analysis at our stores, by the way, which we didn't do that at Performance Footwear when I first got in, but we just started doing that during the pandemic. We brought in a foot strike pad where you can walk across it, and it's a dynamic gait analysis. So similar to what I had with the athlete's foot. And we have, so what did I say? You should be asked 5 questions. You should be assessed. So that means for a beginner, getting on a pad like that, or someone who has enough experience that can visibly see how your gait works. Review of your old shoes. If you have run even casually a little bit, we should look at your old shoes. Those wear patterns are more important than what I get out of all my machinery and eyes. Your history counts for much more. So an old pair of shoes. So you should expect that I'm looking for those things. I'm looking to ask you 5 questions. Look at your gait on a system, or even a just walking across, and then I should be looking at your old shoes. Those are expectations from go. I should be measuring you. If I'm not measuring you, I'm the wrong store. If you say I'm a size 10 and I know I'm a 10, I should still say, sit down, let me measure you. Because statistically, it's the last I heard the statistic was still broken down men to women. So 9 out of 10 women wear their shoes too small, and 7 to 10 out of 10 men wear their shoes too small. So it's because of what you get accustomed to wearing casual shoes, dressy shoes. It's not the same as wearing athletic shoes. So statistically, most people get it wrong. And so size is incredibly important. It will change your gait. It'll change your form if you wear a shoe even slightly too small. And then, so those are basic criteria you should expect and you should look for. You should seek it out. Now, stores over the years have started to charge for the service because people started taking advantage. People started saying, hey, can you do all the hard work and then I'm going to go buy it online? Yeah. By the way, for anyone listening, the prices are the same. They're dictated by the manufacturers now. Yeah. Usually you're not finding a better price online.
Support your local stores. That's important.
Yeah, support the local community. I'll go more into that in a moment, but the important thing is to develop this relationship with your local shop. And because your workout is not going to stay the same. It's going to change. There's going to be a problem. There's an evolution that will happen. And you need these people. And, shops like ours are going to start to go away unless they're supported. So we need to be there for you. You need to rely on us. We are very useful tools for you, but your expectations of us should be high. You should expect that we give you professional sound advice and that we are not leaning you a certain way because I make a commission or because I'm going to make more money on you. So you should have a trust. And nowadays I use things like Yelp and Google reviews to look at places. And I don't necessarily look for all the positives. I look for some of the negatives. I look to see what people really had to say against the place as well. I take that and I find the middle ground. I look at the positives, I look at the negatives. If they are a 5-store shop and they have 80 reviews, there you go. That's the places that you go. You need to find places that are not necessarily just for runners. So I like to say that we are a comfort store as well as we are a running store. To be a running store doesn't mean that I just have to cater to runners. It means that I cater to anyone who's looking for comfort and looking for staying injury free. A walker, by the way, should be in the same shoes as a runner. So I treat it the same way. So it's an intimidating term to hear running shop, but a running shop really should have the skill set to fit anybody. But that's what you really should be looking for, is a running store with people staffed correctly.
I love it. And these are great tips for anyone who's looking to get a shoe. And I 100% agree with you. I support your local store in large part to build that relationship. And again, going back to how you started here in Vegas, I mean, that's what you were known for, is, people going back and talking with you, and then in working with them saying, no, we need to try a different shoe. This shoe isn't working for you. There's only one way to do that is to work with someone who sees this every day, and you build up this expertise that is then valuable for whoever walks into your shop. So that's some great tips. So James, this has been great.
Find a good teacher.
What's that?
Find a great teacher.
Yeah.
That's what you're looking for.
That's right. That's exactly right. And not everyone needs to be a shoe expert, but you need to develop a relationship with a shoe expert so that they can help guide you into that right pair of shoes, because the industry is always changing. But that's the advantage of someone like you, is that you're able to stay current, whereas me as the runner, I can just go tap into that and find the best shoes. So James, this has been great to catch up with you.
Absolutely. Definitely. I missed you.
Yeah, it's funny. Actually, I've written down a few more ideas. I'm gonna talk with you after we end up on this call. It's always fun talking with you about shoes and your level of knowledge, and that gets my brain thinking about some of the research projects that we're doing and where those lines intersect. So this has been fantastic.
Some of the most fun conversations I've ever had have been with you.
Well, that's good. All right, James. Thanks everyone for out there who is listening, and this is awesome. Thanks so much.